Chili here with Sirius Talis Moon, and this is an energy reading that relates to the previous video. And this has to do with a family that had real estate. Either they had real estate or they were realtors, and that something seems to be and here's the bless you. Here's the thing, there are many rumors surrounding something that happened in their real estate or in the family. And so this is Mars hour Saturn day. So there was something about the relationships between a married couple that had a real estate company, and there was some scandal, maybe to try to get them away from the equation regarding the natural resources in the region. Getting kind of like a Dead Sea region or a region that is rich with natural resources. And there was something that was, somebody was just playing a chaos agent around that family. Now, it's kind of like a Rashomon, okay? Several stories arise. One was that one of the apartments, or one of the several of the real estate, had to be allocated to be um, kind of like either an Epstein type of a place or something under the guise of a safety house for intelligence or something like that. Another thing was that there are stories around the lady that is the married lady that has the real estate company, that it's her lineage and that she used witchcraft to marry someone that had a girlfriend at the time or something like that. Now, another story is that someone either pretending to be that real estate lady or that's that real estate lady pretending to be someone else tried to contact a tenant that escaped human trafficking in one of their estates. And that lady might have been told that somebody was trying to get at her husband. But here's the thing. As that tenant escaped, there were various attempts to traffic that tenant and various attempts to pretend that that tenant had affiliation with Illuminati or anything like that, which wasn't the case at all. In fact, what I'm getting, and you might resonate as one of the tenants, okay? Whether there were campaigns on your business or that you could have escaped even a friendship or a relationship, and then or even a roommate, okay, type of situation where you had to find kind of like your own residence, and um, you try to intuit where would be better, what would be better option under the circumstances, and there is an entire web of relation to do with a secret society, war crimes, and some sort of mafia real estate organization that could have to do with ritual abuse. So what I'm getting is that Uranus at the end of Taurus, um, continuing on to the previous reading, it can be the case that that lady that was married, whether it was her lineage of the real estate or she married to a person, and they ran real estate, but they were also affiliated with a trafficking cult and an extortion cult. And there was a combat around the city because of the natural resources. There was a fierce combat around the real estate in that region, and there was an attempt to kind of like outthrow the current, even if they ran extortion cult, it was kind of like a fight between extortion cults. Or they could have had something on, um, like major figures or major oil figures even. Now, this lady, if she is, if she was trafficked to this man, okay, she had to pretend, kind of like Melania Trump had to pretend that women that complained about her husband were trying to promote themselves through or something like that, when both Melania Trump and those women were trafficked. But here in that case, there wasn't anything that's happening with that between either the lady or the husband and the tenants, other than the fact that there were rituals done trying to traffic some of the tenants that ran away mid-contract, leaving kind of like, it's kind of like in a war, okay? Leaving their family pictures, leaving their papers, their certificates, everything. Um, and there was something where somebody was trying to leverage the real estate deal or the renting deal to try to traffic the residents. Because the tenant was not complying, there are some sort of real estate agendas to leave a place completely ruined and then to make it such that the owners of the estate will sell the estate to the flippers. That tenant wasn't agreeing to do that. In fact, they were those type of tenants. They were thinking at the thing like to actually upgrade the level of the estate because they were thinking about how do they learn to maintain a house for living. So instead of ruining the estate, they actually began to raise the real estate value. And that was not good for the people that put them there. The people that put them there wanted them to lower the value of the estate, not to raise the value, particularly of the land. They did something with the land. They rejuvenated the soil. They took the trash from the junkyard. It's something I see particularly with the land. Okay, they began to remineralize the land. Maybe they just wanted to grow crops or wanted to grow like tomatoes or something, but they began to work at the land at the level that could really like reforest the area. So, well, that those type of tenants, they were either doing something like guerrilla gardening or whatnot. There were major attempts to make it look like they're trying to lower the estate while all the neighbors actually wanted to buy the estate following the tenant because they saw the value of the land. Some of them wanted to build on the land. Some of them wanted to keep the land as it is. Like it was the plan of the people that put those tenants in those apartments was to lower the quality of the estate so that they will sell the estate. But it was something like an artist city. So let's say they would look at the front door, okay, and they would say, "Oh, let's do weird things on the front door to make it not sellable." But the tenants, they were creating art and beginning sketches of paintings that could make it like the Blue City in Morocco, or something like paintings and art that was retrieving the place to be an artist's village. Or there was a thought to, okay, oh, there was a thought for to make that place a junkyard. So, when the people throw the fruits or throw the excess organic waste at the soil to nourish the soil. But the tenants, they did that, and then they began to refresh the soil. Whether it's digging half moons, whether it's learning ancient ways to rejuvenate, whether it's even guerrilla gardening, and it got the neighbors, okay, in the neighboring village, in the neighboring society, see that there is something of value in that estate, and they were actually willing to pay more for that estate instead of less. So, but they had to work it with the real estate. Now, either the real estate wanted to flip the house themselves, even though I'm getting it was a local residence house. So it belonged to the family. Somebody used to even live there in the family. So they try to do all kind of tricks to show that the tenants, or to present the tenants as masons, as flippers, as organized crime, but that was not working. And consequently, the crime business and human trafficking that either the husband or the husband and the wife were affiliated with in the entire country began to be exposed to the cameras of foreign regimes that were interested in the real estate and resources of the entire country. And I'm getting that it could even be that this was the money line. They wanted to expose that realtor so that they can take over the land. If the and that those tenants, because I'm getting it's more than one, those tenants that ran away from those type of trafficking deals, they have their documents, they have their family pictures, they have their study certificates, they have everything, and they're entitled to full diplomatic immunity. Now, the journey of these tenants that was documented, and those documents leaked to the authorities. Think about today, in most countries, you don't need a hidden camera to take pictures of a person. The cameras and hidden cameras everywhere. And in terms of something being used as evidence, the person that films someone with their phone, or sitting in the train as like an informant, or and the camera that would be in the train, both these cameras are useless as evidence because they're not authorized. Okay? They can be used to locate a kidnapped person, but other than that, they cannot be used as evidence because it is unauthorized. Okay, it's not like it's surveillance on citizens that does not and cannot qualify as evidence. And the alternative is that those cameras will be used as evidence to show who are the people that, let's say, slaughtered a cat in the living room, in the bedroom, not in the living room, in the bedroom, and painted a heart shape because it was a part of a blood ritual to use the pets to traffic the people inside that living room. And what rituals were done. So now with Uranus Taurus, there is this big giant mess that they thought to put on the tenants. But the tenants are not running a trafficking or extortion cults. They don't own an Epstein Island. They don't own a real estate. Now, into that goes some sort of an occult. And now they find out that they can't really put it on the tenants. And this has to do with the house flipping, organized crime, and the fact that and here was, to be very honest, their mistake was that they were activating Uranus. Uranus is rebellion, is making a mess, is creating chaos. But Uranus brings clarity from that chaos. And that's the part they missed. Uranus at the last degrees of Taurus are the degrees where the mess begins to clarify. The storm begins to settle, and then the mess begins to clarify. Those that were thinking to bypass the tenants from the dividends that they are deserving of for preserving an estate and raising its value, ran either into the house flippers, or in case they were affiliated with crime, all of their crime got exposed. Because they summoned chaos, okay? The gods of chaos. First of all, the god of the thunder. Jupiter retrograde is associated with Thor, and I'm not really acquainted with Thor, okay? But it's the lightning strike of justice, and lightning, we know, is a part of the storm. The gods of the storm are associated also with Uranus, Loki, Enki. And remember, the sky that punishes the land loses mandate of the heaven, be it the leaders or the people. So they summoned the storm thinking that they could hide their crimes in chaos. They could have even been occultistically misled by purpose. Okay, because these people, they exploited lands, they exploited tribes, they exploited um, the art of the occult. And when they summoned the cows, they forgot that these cows will unveil to the oil company, to the monarchies, to the dynasties, all of the corruption. Because this is what Uranus does. Now, if the corruption stemmed from, let's say, people grew up in lineages where they were tortured and became traffickers and so on, that would also be exposed. Okay, so it's not about something being unjust, unfair, or leaving out the underdogs, not at all. It's just that all the cows being exposed. The childhood pictures of the tenets, the secrets of the lineage. Okay, everybody's secrets got refreshed in the air. Now, those people that thought to profit off of that will need to participate, because after the cows there is basically, yes, there is basically a new order, but those that thought to profit off of that would have to um, balance the scale, because Venus is ruling on both Taurus and Libra. For example, after the Second World War, they had to give voting rights to women and women to have a bank account and so on and so forth. But this one touched um, on something way, way deeper. And nobody will be able to take over the land without sorting that cows. And to sort that cows, all of those who thought to profit off of the cows by doing criminal activity that is authentically criminal, okay? I'm not talking about, all of these people would either have to really authentically sort their own cows, or they will just not be the ones to benefit from the cows that they summoned. Occultistically, the ladies that try to do lust magic on people to win their hearts or whatnot, those ladies might be ending up with an Epstein. The men that try to do lust magic to take control over women, they might be exposed. Okay? Any form of energy, Uranus in Taurus liberates us from any form of energy siphoning. Also, Uranus in Scorpio. Uranus was in Scorpio, um, I think, between the end of this, towards the end of the 70s. Okay, something towards the beginning, end of the 70s. The 60s was the late 60s to beginning of the 70s was Uranus in Libra, and then Uranus in Scorpio. Both of the Taurus and the Scorpio axis, for example, during Uranus in Scorpio, at the end of Uranus in Scorpio, wait a second, during Uranus in Scorpio, I believe we had the, yeah, we had the revolution in Iran. And that was and during the 70s, it was possible to criticize Israel. Okay, there was a revolution in the oil industry. Now they tried to do in Israel what they did in Iran. And that real estate was kind of at the heart of that. It was a real estate that was really, it's the type of real estate that if somebody would dig underneath, they would find oil or gas. And the tenants began to identify that. It was the time of Uranus and Taurus. People were doing guerrilla gardening. They were watching the stars at night. They were, okay, digging half moons. They were, returning the blood to the soil. They were, okay, they were learning the old ways of like you eat an apple, throw the apple into the land, and then an apple tree will grow. There's something about the rewilding of the land. But the realtors, they were a part of a secret society that is with the 2030 agenda to charge for the water, to charge for the this, to charge for the that. But here is the thing, when it comes to monetizing the ecosystem, to try to make it painful in the money to companies and people that violate like the nature and so on and so forth, that's not really working on the big companies that actually violate nature. In fact, that very estate was sitting on oil and gas. And people try to make the tenants make the estate value less, but the tenants were on a journey of recovery of their own sexual energy. Okay, they were escaping trafficking even within the estate. And then they began to work with the land, to work with the soil, to feed the animals, to rewild the estate, to create paintings. Okay, if it was, let's say, if the door was looking bad, instead of asking for somebody to renovate, they began to make of it a painting. So they weren't ruining the value, they're actually adding value. And those that put those tenants there, okay, those people that made sure that these tenants will see that estate and will stay in that estate, they try to connect to the intuition. However, they wanted the tenants to ruin the place so that they can buy the estate for less money, where everybody knows that they were going to drill the oil and the gas in that area. But those tenants, first of all, they were like the people that was like, oh, well, the energy of Nikola Tesla is free energy. We don't even need gas and oil. And they were doing the rewilding, and they were healing. They were looking at the stars, and they were painting. Okay, they were not lowering the value of the estate. In fact, they got everybody interested to buy the land. And those that put them there wanted the tenant to be trafficked and not enjoy the fruits of any real estate deal. However, those tenants, they were, because it's not just one apartment, okay? It pertains to the areas where they want to drill oil, particularly in Palestine. It could even be Palestinian estates and so on. I don't know about Jordan, okay? from Galilee to the Nile, is what I'm getting. And the commodification of nature wasn't needed with those type of people. They weren't the type of people that needed to be told to not violate nature or to restore nature. So they put, it's almost by divine chaotic hand, they were putting the exact wrong tenets in those areas. And instead of the cows that would get people to sell the estate in, 2 pennies to some oil company, or to people that would get the rights to that could sell the rights for mining the natural resources, then actually what was created was a completely different type of chaos that targets the oil giants that had extortion codes to be extorted or to be exposed for violating children. So with Uranus in the end of Taurus, any relations, Venus, including relations of oil companies, oil, Scorpio, well water, that were founded on rape, Beta Persei, end up with divorce Uranus in the best of case, and or dead bodies upon dead bodies of those who raped. And the smug people that were running the rings of trafficking were basically summoning that chaos, and they summoned the very chaos that will expose them and dispose of them. The more they try to mix the identities, okay, the more clarity began to be about the structure of the offenses, and then the names were falling like the rain into the correct places of the equation. People complained to Anneke Lucas, why doesn't she mention the name? She mentioned the oil companies. Somebody pushed her to name David Rockefeller. But she mentioned the oil companies. I think she even mentioned the Rothschild, okay, running the extortion codes. And she talked about the structure. But she did mention Bilderberg Group. Those children were used as gifts to appease oil companies, monarchies, and policymakers. And now I said what I said. Mars rules names. And Lilith and the Sun at the last decan of Scorpio, it means that the names of the offenders are falling like the rain into the puzzle of the equation, including the mind controllers and the handlers. Okay, and the people behind the smoke screen, the people that do it in the astral. And the reason is because those societies themselves summoned chaos. They didn't know that the role of chaos is to create clarity. They were misguided and misled by spiritual teachings, and or they consulted spiritualists, and they thought that they could get a hold over chaos the way they did in the 60s when Pluto was conjoining Uranus. However, although Pluto is sextiling Uranus in Sedna when Uranus is in Gemini, what else did we have in the 60s? And that was the establishing of PTSD and the veterans beginning to require for PTSD, which later would lead to the feminist revolution around abolishing rape within marriage and the abolishing in the 80s of pedophilia. Okay, without PTSD, we actually can't establish the harm that is done to trafficked children and raped women. So that was the onset with Pluto Uranus, Pluto psychology, Uranus basically the chaos blending into psychology and liberating Kundalini energy from psychological and occultistic control. Now it was opposing Saturn and Chiron in Pisces, which was the wound around the structure of religion and mafia and, the Gladio. But also what preceded the Gladio. Now Uranus trines Pluto with Sedna. People want to balance the nervous system, okay, by frequency, the med beds or whatnot. I have no idea what the thing is, but the power of frequency to balance the nervous system to treat psychological traumas. Of course, that will expose all the things that Anneke Lucas is talking about for the way that they worked around frequency. Okay, which is the MK Often, MK Ultra, and similar projects across the globe. And of course, we don't have such a composition without new forms of energy and the awareness to the frequency damage. Okay, even as I broadcast from this phone, it would be increased awareness. Remember the microwave? Neptune, Uranus was meeting in Capricorn and I think later in Aquarius. Remember the microwave boom? And people began to be aware that their microwave could be toxic, could be radiation that is toxic. So people are going to be aware of the radiation effects of ritual abuse and rape. Just as they begin to heal trauma. So what frequency aligns with that? What frequency aligns with that? How do we balance that nervous system to remediate the symptoms of the trauma? And then what it does, it basically exposes. Oh, what if we erase that memory and that memory and that memory? Then the core issue will erupt, and we'll have the scientific revelations around trauma, frequency, oil, gas, and the connection between what it does to the people. This is Sedna, the connection between what it does to the people and what it does to the ecosystem. Now, a lot of the med beds are probably radiation. And what type of frequency and effect does that radiation have, okay, is accumulative. So people, okay, will have to see the onset of Saturn to the sextile to Neptune. We can't have science if all the scientists were silenced in COVID. And so what people don't tend to or dismiss when it comes to the MK Ultra and MK Often becomes their med beds or deathbeds.